Hey man, so why don't you tell me who you are and your title?
My name is Jim Rivers. I was, but still mentally am, a senior recruiter in the game industry.
And do you remember how we met?
Yes, you were working with Obsidian Entertainment. I liked a bunch of toys that you had. I still have it. I still have my yellow not God of War, 40K soldier, my Space Marine that had the
Imperial Fist? Yeah.
Yep, I still
Hell yeah.
have.
Cool.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I always tell myself if I ever get a 3D printer, I hate miniatures that are like what the 1 inch miniatures, but the 5 inch miniatures are the fucking bomb. I
Yeah.
want I want a whole set of those.
I started doing some of the bigger ones. They're pretty cool, man. Export from Unreal to 3D print. It's pretty slick. I'll get you an updated version.
No, dude, my computer that, all right, I am doing this interview on my phone because my computer is so old. This was my working laptop when I worked at Obsidian. And Monahan, on my way out the door, he was like, all right, let me have your laptop. And I'm like, do you really want my laptop? And he looked at it, he goes, no, you can keep it. And he literally just said, keep it.
Cool.
And
Darren Monahan, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Obsidian.
He is the third owner. Yeah. And he's the head of IT and operations.
All right. So where were you before Obsidian? Because that was like 2006, 2008.
2008 is when I officially started in game development. I was a senior career services advisor for the Art Institute of California.
Right. Cool.
And how I ended up getting there was I went to school there. And while I was going to school there, they had a career services person. But if you were gay, or if you had piercings, or you had blue hair, or a tattoo on your face or something, she just wouldn't help you because it was against her Christian values. And she'd tell you that too. And so eventually all these kids who needed, because art school's not cheap, I would sit out the patio because, back then I was a pretty decent smoker. And they would go like, I don't know, I'm going to not be able to survive this. I can't find a job. And I'm like, oh, I'll help you find a job. So, and also I started school at 30, where all these kids are 18, 19. And so I was more or less teaching them how to get jobs and also how to be an employee, because none of them knew how to do shit. And so mostly I sent them to like movie theaters, because then they got free popcorn and they got to go watch stuff for free, but they made enough money to where they could pay for their supplies. So when I got done with college, the president of the school pulled me aside just before I accepted my diploma, or my diploma. He's like, do you want a job? And I looked at him and I'm like, dude, you're actually going to pay me for what I've been doing for the last few years? And he's like, sure. So they hired me as just and they gave me animation and games. And the person that had that position before me, she would have like, her clearance rate was like 10%. And within the year, I was up over 90%. And they had me training all the other career services people at other schools how to deal with the game developers, because film just straight up didn't want to talk to us at all. They were like, fuck you guys. We don't, this is a setup deal. We don't need college kids. And I was like, okay, games do. Games constantly needed fresh.
That's interesting relationship there.
Huh?
That's an interesting relationship that they didn't want the younger people, whereas the games developers are pretty thirsty for that.
Oh, yeah, but see now, all right, the industry is so flooded that even if you did graduate top of your class, you were going to struggle trying to find work.
Mhm.
because there's not a single recruiter out there that will ever over the last, say, 5 years, rarely will post a junior or an associate job. Like, as a recruiter, I just call people that I know. I'm like, hey, I got an associate job. Are you interested? Sure. Boom, done.
So you said clearance. Can you maybe clarify that you said there was a 10% clearance and then yours was 90. Like what does that mean?
Oh, uh, so you get 20 kids. I could get 19 of them a job.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so my clearance was always pretty high because I like everybody more or less, and I get along with everyone. You know, if you ever, you've met me, I mean, but if you meet me out in the open, out in the nature, uh, I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. You dump me in a room with 2,000 people I don't know, I'm going to talk to everybody. That's just who I am. And so even when I was when I was working for the colleges, uh, I knew every recruiter in our industry. I still do, because every time a studio picks up a new recruiter, I definitely go out of my way to be friends with them right away, because you never know. They have stuff that I need, and I have stuff that they need, so we should be friends.
For sure.
And
It's a good network, man. Definitely.
well, yeah, that, and also I had a handful of developers that I didn't touch their studio ever because it was disrespectful. Because I was friends with their recruiter, their recruiters were friends with me. We didn't touch each other's staff at all. But nowadays, nobody cares, and it's really sad because where we used to just savagely go after EA constantly and to try to take all their people because all their people were usually unhappy. So you'd go after the studios that you knew had a certain, you know, mental state that you could use. Or, back then when we were moving people before everything went hybrid or even went network, uh, I used to love calling all the people in the East Coast and be like, tired of shoveling snow? Give me a call. We'll get you out here. We got places in Texas. We got places in California. Come on out. There's sunshine here. And you would always get like 5% be like, man, I'm so done with snow. I need out. I need to move.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, but then California got stupid. Like our rent here, I don't know how people make a living here these days, because honestly, it's ridiculous. Half my employees, when at the Squirrels, at Blind Squirrel, when they said, "Hey, we're moving our base operations to Texas, but we're keeping the studio in California," because all the IT people were in California and all the programmers were in California because programmers can afford to live here. But all the designers and all the artists, most of them, all left and went to Texas. Right,
That's interesting.
like that fast.
Yeah, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this sort of the shift to like hybrid and how that's affected studios and did
Um,
it change the recruiting
it
aspect in terms of like, hey, this studio needs people, but you could be wherever the hell you want?
see, for recruiters, it was fantastic because prior to, uh, if so, your person in charge, so say like the head of HR, tells you, okay, we need X amount of people, or the producers, actually executive production tells you we need 10 new candidates, and they tell you this is what we need. We need seniors here. We need mid levels here, and before, so all mid levels had to be within California or Texas. No ifs, ands, or buts, because they wanted to be able to keep them close enough to the studio, da 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 da. But then after COVID happened and everybody was allowed to work from home, uh, the hardest part about that was we had to buy more computers.
True. You're shipping them out to everybody so they're on the same system.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Well, then, and then half of them would come back. Like we would send them out. And then when they would come back, you ended up with a bunch of busted up ass computers that can't do shit anymore. And then you're like, so like the cost, the pluses and minuses were definitely there because we moved from a 300-person studio down to like a 90-person studio because we could.
Mm.
We had 150 employees, and 75% of them, or 75 of them, would be within walking distance of the studio, but yet they still wouldn't come in because they were like, why should I be in a studio when I can work from home? I've got my kitchen, I got my dog, I got my cat, or whatever. I had one guy who has 3 children, and he gave me the biggest hug in the whole wide world when I finally saw him. And he was like, thank you. You're saving me like $2,000 a month in, kids. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad we did that for you.
Yeah, quality of life with remote is infinitely better. I remember the start of COVID. I used to run in the mornings, and as soon as COVID hit, all these people are out exercising.
Yeah.
And I was like, you replace your commute with, self-care,
Yeah.
and you're infinitely a happier employee, right? Like your energy is going to be better. You're not sitting in a car and, now you're like working out or whatever, right? I just remember like it was so clear there was way more people out, um, but yeah, it's like there's also the delay, in response time and, interaction with
Oh,
staff. There's that, the downside too, right? Like,
well, you're a designer. You've been a designer for what, 25 years, give or
yeah,
take?
yep,
Imagine you don't get water cooler time anymore. You
yeah,
don't
man,
there
that's a
and
big
walk
one.
away and go, Joe, I got this fucking great idea. Da, 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 and then be able to kick it back and forth. You don't have the same instant satisfaction that you used to have with the old studios. Like you used, like at Squirrels, we would have, each team would have, this is one for design, this is one for art for this particular art team, and this is the one for this production group. Production was always on with each other all day, every day. They could see each other's faces at all times. Same with art, even though art never, like, art and production, or programmers are still the worst by being on camera. They don't like it. They don't want to be on. Designers are the opposite. They're like, oh my God, I want to talk to everybody. They're like, I think most designers would actually be really good recruiters at some point because they like to be in front of things and they like to see how they can break shit and make things work.
The big ideas.
The big idea.
Yeah, man, that's definitely one thing I miss is, being in a room or sitting next to like 3 or 4 other designers, and you could throw out a dumb idea, or you can come up with some crazy idea, but that might spark something in someone else, and that actually ends up being good, that goes in the game, or just having like that amount of, brain power melding together, right? There's this whole sort of gestalt intelligence of like people, like 10 designers, 5 designers, all super creative people. You throw an artist or animator in there too, and they throw like, oh, well, I'll have it do this, right? Or it could look this way. And it's infinitely faster, more creative, like I definitely miss that, especially like, working remotely and having people at all different time zones. You might throw an idea out and it could be 48 hours before someone responds. It's like, it's not nearly as fast or efficient, but, or even, as creative.
We had to change our contracts for time.
Mm-hmm.
But he did. Like, you
Longer.
couldn't, oh, this is going to take us 7 months. You have to say now that's going to take 9 plus.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you can't, you're again playing that, are you going to be in front of your screen? Are you going to be there for when I need you? So then producers got, I want to say a good staff of producers are are what everybody needs these days. Where there are a lot of studios that hate producers, hate them. Like, they say vile things about their producers. The thing is they haven't been in a studio that had a perfect producer, developer relationship, where I've only seen that in like 2 studios that I've ever been at. Other studios, man, I've been at studios where, boy, they hated seeing their producers.
Why don't you explain a little bit about what the producer role is from your perspective, and I'll say it from my perspective.
All right, I'm going to tell you perspective should be is there's supposed to be a service group that assists you in getting over the line. Now, some studios do play by that book. There are some studios what I call hammers, and you're the nail. And they sit above you and be like, what's taking you so long? What is your problem? Why are you so slow? Instead of, hey, how can I help you? What do you need? Why are you behind? And how can I assist you? There's a huge difference. Like, I've been at studios where you had the hammers and it was ugly. And you have these poor developers sitting there kind of crying because they can't get caught up. They don't know how to get caught up. They don't have anybody to support them. But then when you're at a studio that has a good production staff and knows how to get the pieces put in place, that's what I like to see. But, again, I've been at 5 or 6 different studios, only had 2 that ever had good production staff.
Yeah, for sure. That's sort of my perspective too, is you have the 2 versions, right? The like, when are you going to be done? Hurry up versus like, how can I help? What's your current, roadblock, and how do we alleviate? Who do I need to talk to fix that? Right.
Yeah.
And, for the longest time from when I started to, just maybe a few years ago, having someone kind of harping on you was anti-productive. It's kind of like crunches the creativity, and it's like, there's so many factors, right? Like maybe the engine broke that day, or there's code issues, or there's infinite things that could hamstring you. Yeah, like people don't understand 90% of game development is just like getting shit to work and test it. There's like that creative component, but you're spending hours, like getting the thing working, functioning. Maybe you get a block out done, but the jump mechanic isn't done, right? So it's this cool. I guess we got to wait till jumping works, or whatever the mechanic is.
I remember talking to a bunch of engineers at Pixar a bunch of years back, and they were the guys in charge of rendering. So they would have an intern or just one of their people in their group. So they would get everything lined up. They would hit the buttons and have all the rendering start, and then all the engineers would go play golf across the way from the studio, because they knew they had like 4 hours until. So they had one poor minion stuck there all day to sit there and make sure that everything rendered the way it was supposed to, and then the rest of them went out and dicked around.
Good times.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to do that.
Pecking order.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Want to spend that kind of money on people playing golf.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely, the productivity side of development too, right? Like performance reviews. And I don't know if you ever have to deal with that. Probably not as much. Yeah.
We like recruitment and HR have more staunch production reviews than anybody.
No, really?
If I fuck up, we get sued. Or if HR fucks up, we get sued. That's how it works. Yeah, like I've come close to being like lawsuit plenty of times, not because of my job, is because I was trying to be honest with people and they didn't want to accept the honesty. And so they just get mad instead. And I'm like, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to give you a different vision of yourself than the one you have, because the one you have is critically wrong.
accountability.
I don't see what you're seeing, and they want to sue you because of defamation, or you're like, really, come on.
Crazy. I had no idea.
Oh, it's very taxing. It sucks.
Yeah.
Especially when you're out in the open. I mean, recruiters technically are like your front people for a studio. And if they say something that pisses somebody off, it comes down right on you fast.
That's true. I guess there's a whole other layer, right? Like, the designer generally deals with, you have producer, an artist that's going to be like your level artist, maybe a little bit of interaction with like an animator, and then maybe another designer, systems or something like that. But that's kind of like your cabal, your short little, group versus, and the personal side is very rarely like brought into it, right? But like HR and recruiting, like what percentage of your day would you say, like walk us through a day, like how much of your day is dealing with personal people's personal issues versus like go make the game, right?
It depends on the studio.
Yeah.
Since I knew everybody at Blind Squirrel, I was involved in stuff, but not on the same level as other studios. There's a big difference. All right, I know you've done this too. The big difference between like a 5 families type of studio, like a Sony, Activision, EA,
Big ones, Microsoft.
That cluster of size, that kind of versus top studios, and there aren't many left of those left, because like Embrace will just go in and just buy 20 of them, or like a couple of years back at the beginning of COVID, Microsoft bought up a ton of studios.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're having problems because none of the studios are doing their jobs either. It's like, so you spend all this. I mean, Embracer just shut down Volition.
Yeah, saw that.
Saw that coming. I mean, Volition is the one that blows my mind is BioWare. How do you let a studio like BioWare, who is historically one of the best studios in the world, how do you let that one fall apart? How?
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the development cycle, right? So game takes so many years, right? You have pre-production where you're kind of planning what you want to do. They've raised capital, right?
Production.
What's that?
If you're allowed to have pre-production.
Yeah, right. So on paper, it's supposed to be like pre-production, production, QA, and then launch, essentially, right? Or marketing and launch. And these studios, right? They go through this process over and over, and every studio kind of has their template for how they do it, and that's evolving, right? From like when I started, it was you actually had physical CDs, right? Yeah, that's true, right? And so some studios don't, some do, and you went from physical discs to, it was a big deal when Xbox wanted to be online and have downloadable games, and now you have, Twitch marketing and influencers and, that whole thing, right? So there's this big change in, it's evolved drastically. But I guess just in terms of the whole development process, right? Like how would you say, or like what would you say is kind of standard, or what would cause issues, or when you release the game and it's well received or not, like there's the development process is kind of the same for many studios, and it's like,
all right,
yeah,
all right. So the biggies, the 5 families, as I like to call them, they would hire everybody. So like hypothetically, they would hire between 4 and 1,000 people to do a game. To me, blows my mind, because I've worked in a 150 person studio and done almost the exact same level of shit that these other people have, but with a 10th, not even a 10th. Yeah, like a 10th of what they have. and still get the stuff done. I don't understand like the efficiency over the years where you can take smaller studios that are, all right, I'll give you an example, because we can talk design, you and I. I was at studios where if you were a systems designer, that's all you did. That was your little box. And if you had stuff, great, you had stuff to do. If not, you sat in your chair and you spun around and waited until you had a producer go, here's your new stuff for today. In a small studio, as a designer, they ask you, what's your forte first? What do you like to do? All right, John, what's your favorite thing to do being a designer? What do you like to do best?
You asking me personally? Actually, yes. Yeah, it was like, I want to do level design, right? Or
okay.
I want to do, systems.
But what next thing that the next, all right, so 3 boxes. Level design is number 1. What's your second box?
Systems, mechanics, combat.
Okay. What's your next one after that?
Maybe character or animation, something like that.
Okay. So at like the small studio, I have a list of everything that you can do. This is what you're great at. So that will be your primary. Now your seconds come out like all of a sudden you're done doing what you're doing there, but the other team, so say like your studio has 2 or 3 teams, the other team needs a systems guy, but for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So they take you off of one and stick you over there. So now that saves you a ton of cash because now you're not burning up all this money of a person sitting in a chair not doing anything. You constantly have this flow. That's why like a small studio, even like Obsidian, when we had like a bunch of games going on, you guys got bipped all the time back and forth between games because they had to. They didn't have the body. They didn't have the body width or the manpower to get it done.
For sure.
See, those are the studios that are smart and are efficient, are the ones that see the bigger picture. Instead of hiring 600 employees, spread it out. Know how to make your wealth work, your body structure work, instead of just, I just need more bodies.
Yeah,
I had a studio that every time they had an issue, they'd hire another producer. And we had like 15 producers. It was insane because all of a sudden you'd have a meeting and 5 producers would show up and you're like, I don't need 5 producers to talk about this one task. Give me one person and you can share the wealth with each other. I don't need to talk to all of you.
And put all of them in Scrum. That reminds me of the point, like we were talking producers earlier where, when I shifted from designing to managing more and having the spreadsheet of here's every asset that needs to be made and every animation and every level, and doing the production side myself, where it's this, this huge spreadsheet with checkboxes. And I was like, fuck, this sucks. I don't actually want to be following up on all these assets, and it just gave me this world of appreciation for, like someone that's just like going down the list, bang out the different assets, and it was like I completely shifted from creative to, to management. And it's like, it's great from, the top down perspective, but in terms of like losing the creativity, which is what I love, and managing, checking off assets, it super sucked, but it was like appreciating, the role of like, that's why they're there and that's what they're helping with, and there's the different approaches of like, why aren't you done? Get it done, hurry up, versus just like, why, what can I do? How can I help you? Yeah.
See, that's the thing that I've learned over the years. People want to belong to a certain studio, and I'm like, do you really want to? Do you really? Well, I love their game. You could love their game, but do you want to work in that kind of atmosphere? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you never, ever go to a studio without looking. Like, I'll give you an example, and please don't burn me down, complete. Oh, actually, I don't even have to. I had this one kid worked his ass off to get into the studio. Waited like 6 months to get in there. Finally gets in there. He lasted about 4 months and quit. And I catch up with him at one of our Beer Wednesdays. And I'm like, what the hell? You quit already? And he's like, oh yeah, dude, the culture was terrible. I didn't have a single person to talk to. And they always wanted me to work out with them all the time. And I'm not do look at me. Do I look like a workout kind of guy?
You look good, man.
No. And they're like, yeah, I just needed to find. And then I found him a studio to work for, and he loved it. It wasn't his style of game, right? And he jumped into it, found the culture that he loved, and went from there. That is how it should be.
That's a good point, that there's the games you play and the games you develop are pretty different a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Right. And there's also a culture component from, your personality and the culture of the studio. Every studio is super different that I've worked with. And, just as time goes on, my priorities shift, so there's that component too. But why don't you talk a little bit about Beer Wednesday? Because that was epic. It was amazing. So
all right.
How did that start? What's the gist?
So I started Beer Wednesday in 2008, and I was by myself. My ex-wife told me, you're at home too much. I need you out of the house. And so I was like, okay, it's Wednesday. She goes, go have a beer with your friends. All right. So I started reaching out to everybody. I'm like, hey, everybody, it's Wednesday. Let's go have a beer. So it started off with like 10 people. No big thing. And
this
then
is Orange County, right? So we're in Orange County, Subsidian.
We were in beautiful Tustin, California.
Yeah. What was the place?
Well, originally it was JT Schmidt's, but because back then everybody smoked, JT Schmidt's kicked us out. They said, look, we like your business, but it's not worth it to us.
I'm sorry.
You need your laptop?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it is plugged in. So, so I was friendly with the bar, the manager at this bar around the corner. It was called the Old Dubliner. We eventually just been the Dub, and they eventually did the sign and just called it the Dub. And so I got there with my 10 people, and they loved it out there because they could smoke, and the food was bar food. It was, and eventually I ended up with a recruiter friend. Well, he wasn't my friend back then. He and I didn't like each other originally. And he's like, hey, go have lunch with me. And I'm like, bro, I don't need you as a recruiter. Just have lunch with me. I'm like, okay. So he and I we had a lunch and we laughed, and I don't know what just happened.
Good.
Oh, hold on one second. I will call her back in a moment. That's possibly an interview.
Nice.
With Sony, of all things.
That was okay.
That was Stacy Frias. I'll call her right back. So it started off, and then so he got there and he goes, I like what you do. And we had the original waitress from literally the whole time. And we watched all each other's lives grow, and but back then developers were very, 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 very different than they are now.
How so?
Those developers back then were in it to win it. They were hardcore partiers. All they wanted to do was just be around each other and party and make games and party and make games and do nefarious stuff and make games. Kids nowadays, they're like, oh, I'll have my water, my iced tea. of my fries. So it's a very, very different mindset, right? They don't smoke anymore, and if they do, they smoke the left-handed cigarettes, and and you can't do that at a bar except out in the parking lot. But done. uh, but
Right.
So eventually, like, the tribes changed. The whole
Yeah, I remember the crowd ended up being huge, right? Like from like how many years was that going on? Because I think you were still going strong after I moved down to San Diego.
It stayed strong for a solid 8 years.
Yeah. I mean, and it was packed, right? There's like hundreds of people.
Oh, yeah. And then it just petered out. But the craziest part about this, John, is still to this day, I could be at a GDC, I could be at a PAX. Out of nowhere, I'll have a drink show up on my table, and there'll be somebody across the bar that was a Beer Wednesday member from 10 years ago. They're like, I'm a director now. I'm a manager now. I'm a this now. There were so many people that came out of Beer Wednesday. All of them made something of themselves.
That's cool. Yeah, that's great.
They worked very hard at it, and they listened. That's the thing that always got to me is the kids that did listen and actually took took notes, I guess the best way I could put it, mental notes, and listen to what we had to say, like me and Dino and all the other game recruiters that were other game developers that were there. And a lot of seniors started showing up after a while because they were like, oh, this is kind of cool. I get to be around nerds. All right. This was the whole ticket to making Beer Wednesday great was the fact that I realized that most game developers back then, not now, but back then, did not have the ability to walk into a regular bar and feel comfortable because they weren't around their own kind.
Yeah.
Right. But now you take an entire crowd that are all like-minded, that all partially kind of think the way that they all do. And boy, they flourished. And it went on for, and LA tried. They had but they only did it once a month. I did it every week for 13 years. That shit got old. It wore down on my soul after a while. Like I would sit out in the parking lot and I don't want to go in. I don't want to do this today. I'm not in the mood. But once I got there, and once the people were there, and it just kind of brought you back and made you want to be there. So I miss it. I miss that era. But the thing is, you can never go back. You always have to keep moving forward.
Sure.
And now, like, you got to try to make all of our devs feel happy and comfortable, but you can't do it in a bar anymore. So, like, the Squirrels, we had a Friday thing that we all worked on, and it, you had people that were single, or even ones with families. They would chime in and just sit and talk to their members via Teams.
So you're saying that there's been a pretty big shift in the developer mindset. I mean, I've noticed it's as well. Just different people, different mindset, different characteristics, everything. It kind of makes me think like, so that was maybe the last decade or so, right? 08 to 18, and then like, where would you say, like, how do you think things are going the next 10 years? Like, what's the future? We went, hybrid, remote.
Here is the fun part that was interesting. So the ones that got married, right? They all disappeared right away. Like, all of a sudden they were there, all of a sudden they were gone. Or they would bring their wife in or their husband in for a moment, and then they would be gone. You'd never see them again. And then children started getting born. So your whole tribe, like a big chunk of your tribe, disappeared. So now instead of thinking, oh, I got to just find these people and get them involved, It was, now I have to find new ways to deal with, Bill's got a brand new baby. We're not going to see Bill for a while. Maybe we can be nice to Bill over the line, but see, after a while, nobody cared. That's the funny part. It's families are the ones that majorly changed our industry, because like when we first got into games, nobody had kids. The only people who had kids were the executives. They could afford to have kids. None of us could afford to have kids. And then after a while, you had kids, Tyson had kids, everybody started having children. And then all of a sudden, everybody that was it. Families come first, always.
For sure. I mean, it was my daughter's first birthday, and I had just played a soccer game for the company team, and I broke my arm.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, so I break my arm in a game, and I go home. It's my daughter's first birthday, like a couple days later, and she comes up to me and she's like, up, like pick me up. And I'm sitting there with this like arm in a cast, and I'm just like, I'm an idiot. I'm basically an idiot. Like, what have I done? Like I need to adjust the scale here a little bit, the focus. And it was like, man, like I'm out here having fun, I'm like partying, and it was definitely like the fork in the road of like, we gotta take care of this little girl here, and cut back on
the world, didn't it?
Yeah, man, it's pretty wild for sure. And like you said, Tyson, other guys, like, changes you for sure. It's a big difference.
Tyson manned up. I'm
so sorry. I'm leaving. Are the chairs in the garage?
The chairs are in the garage. Sorry. They were taking up the back of your car.
Oh, okay.
Have fun.
Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Just going to the beach.
Oh, sweet.
Taking the dog.
So there's definitely the family component. It kind of changes.
Here's another one that changed. Well, it was not known, but there were a lot of like changes that changed the world. Was, all right, I'll give you an example. I had a CEO ask me to hire more women because at the time the studio didn't have any. Well, we had 3, and I had a lead. Was he a senior or a lead? I don't remember. I'm going to say senior. Walks into my office after the CEO left and said, "We don't need them here. They're not like us." I hired so many female, like designers mostly. That was the fun part. Was senior designers back then were so rigid. They didn't want to agree with anybody or anything. And then you throw a different mindset and they're like, I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's not how games should be. And you're like, shut the hell up, dude. I've watched our industry change. When I first got into games, there was 1 girl in 300. Now it's like 1 in 25. And I think our games are better. Like, massively better, because they weren't so one-sided. They're like, you brought a whole new concept into everything. I just wish there were more female engineers. Like I've hired in my life in recruiting, I've hired 2 female engineers.
Out of how many people would you say? What percentage is that? 1%?
Less than 1%.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I saw a big shift too. There was no females the first few studios I worked at, and then the last couple, it's like 30%, 40, 50%. It was a huge difference. Like,
I like it.
What would you say caused that? Is it more people getting into development, culture change, games are cool?
All the
There's
above.
A home for nerds.
You could never skip one thing that causes things. It's a massive domino effect. I don't know how to state it and make it sound to where I know what I'm talking about, but the thing is it needed to be done. Our industry was so rigid because it was just a big nerd boy, society. And the thing is the girls are playing games too. Guys, get over it. Stop being a douche and work forward. And it was hard. And then we had guys that were becoming girls becoming guys, and yada yada yada, and everything needed to work together. But the thing is everybody wanted to make it give it a label. Everybody wanted to label everything. How about this? You're a game developer. You're a game developer first. You can be all these other things in the periphery, but you're a game developer first. I don't care if you have 5 arms and you have an eye in the back of your head. I could give a crap. I want you to be able to be happy doing what you're doing. Now, outside of that, that's totally up to you. That has nothing to do with me. But the thing is that makes me sound like a dickhead, but I'm not. Like, I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to work together. Again, just learn how to work together.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely something you probably had to deal with more, that for, a designer and the teams I worked with, it was almost always just like, here's your meeting, here's your tasks, who do you need to interact with? Right. And, just ultimately we need to ship a product and earn our keep. Right. It was like, get this out the door, make an awesome product everyone's proud of. And it was very, very seldom there was any kind of like personal, there's definitely relationships you develop with people and, hang out with, it's like I'm going to lunch with these guys or whatever. Or even just gaming after hours or, on breaks and stuff. There's like that whole part. What's that?
All right. I miss walking into and they had a 40K, like the entire table was done. And they had big signs all around the thing. They're like, you touch this and you die.
Where was this?
At Obsidian.
Yeah.
They would have signs on there. They had the big, huge table. It'd be all laid out.
Conference room. Yeah.
Yeah. And they would say, you touch our shit, you die. And they would be going at one game for days and days and days. And you're like, dude, that's one thing I have to say I do miss is that kind of stuff, because it forced your brain to think outside of the box, because now you had to punish this other person and also be friends. It's one of those things.
Are you a gamer? You consider yourself a gamer? Yeah.
No, I do not have. Married, got a dog. My day goes like that. When I'm working, goes like that. When I'm not working, goes like that.
So what would you say, maybe walk me through your average day and what gets you out of bed? What are you excited about as like a recruiter, right? As like, what does Big Jim, what puts a smile on your face, dude?
Oh, is when I have the list. So I had a really great partner at work, and she's still at the studio, because she was a hybrid between HR and recruiting. So she got stuck in between the two, which is fine. I'm straight recruiter. I'm not an HR person at all. I would love to be. I try to be, and I try to abide by all HR rules and guidelines and stuff. But I'm a recruiter first and foremost. How I wake up in the morning and be happy is when I get to work and I have like 18 recs to fill. Other people are like, "Oh my God, it's so much work." No, that brings the juices up for me, because I have something I like hunting. not like physical hunting, like shooting deer and stuff. That to me is like, there's no point in that. Deer can't ricochet a bullet. That's not how that works.
No
But
shield.
hunting for like the perfect people. There's something about it that makes me happy. I got some really great designers the last 4 years. Some of them are so brilliant and wonderful. And like, I used to just get the biggest kick out of being a part of their interviews and watching how, especially older seniors, and you're like, how did you get into, oh yeah. If I had $1 for everybody, it's like, I had a Nintendo class, I had a NES, or I had a PlayStation 1. You get them started, or I had a Atari 2600, and it just starts from there, and it just goes up, and you listen to how their world became what it is now. I love listening to designers. They're always, to me, and I have an art degree. Like, I love art and I love artists. I do, but like, listening to a designer put together how they want something to be put together, there's something magical about it.
For sure. What would you say is the difference? What's the big difference between art and design?
Oh God, tons. Art just makes everything look pretty. Designers have to figure out why it's there and how to make, somebody smash into it. They are the ones who have to make the buildings have a story, where art just makes it look pretty. There's a huge difference between the two.
Yeah, for sure.
The hardest part that I always thought was very interesting, like, if you're an artist and you can't make it in games, you can be an artist for other things. When you're a programmer and you don't make it in games, you can make bank apps. You can go work for somebody else. But if you're a designer and you suck at being a designer, where do you go?
That's a rough life, dude.
It's like, I've met a lot of designers that have gone the full 30 years, and you ask them, like, this, that, or the other, and they're like, well, I'm on my third wife, I've got 5 kids with 3 different women, because, I used to tell the people at GDC all the time, well, let me do a presentation on, so your husband or wife is a game developer, how do you deal with your family? Because I remember one time during a Christmas break, and my ex-wife was driving me up the fucking wall, and I was ready to toss her out a window. I know. Please cut this out here.
No. Oh, you're good. You're good.
And I went to the studio because I just wanted some peace and quiet. I knew nobody would be there. No, about 75% of the studio was there. Everybody was working. Why are you here? I was tired of my family. Sick of seeing them. Sick of this and sick of that, and dealing with this and dealing with that. When I make games, I'm happy. When I'm stuck at home, I'm not happy. And the thing is over the years, I've watched that change, where you're starting to find more of an equal balance between being at home with your family and making your family work, and also being at work and making that family work. That was the big key. That was a big change. I'm going to say 2018, 2019, when I started making, like, I made a mental note of it when you started seeing a significant change between, we're going to party all night long and get smashed and make video games all day, blah, 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 to I'm not going to be out there at the bar all night. I'm going to go and play, I'm going to play tabletop games with my kids and, try to make things nice with my family. That was, I think 18, 19 was the big significant change. And then when COVID happened and we all got stuck with each other, that's when it super changed.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it definitely grew up a little bit, the industry changed for sure. That was right around that time. That was a big one. Yeah. So, all right. So we'll wrap it up.
Giving you what you need. I
What's that?
feel like I'm just ranting.
No, this is perfect, man. I love it. Like I said, this is something I want to do. I want to get a bunch of people, and I love talking shop. I love talking to developers. Like, to me, there's just nothing better. You know, it's awesome. And you know, post COVID remote world, you know, like we were talking before, like just jiving with people and like not really having that studio interaction. You know, it's project I was working on last year. Like everything was you know, meet calls. You know, half your day was calls, and it's cool to interact with people, but it's like super draining too. You know, be sitting on a call all day. You know, like it's different. But I mean, I guess so. Yeah, to I guess wrap things up, what would you like if someone wanted to be? I'm going to be Jim Rivers. I want to be a recruiter for, you know, tech, games, entertainment, whatever it is. Like, what would you tell them? Maybe what would you do different? Like, if you could go back and be like, here's the ideal path.
All right. When it comes to recruitment, there is no ideal path. Most people that are recruiters never chose to be a recruiter. And the ones who do choose to be recruiters usually suck. The ones that kind of got dropped into it, like I got dropped into it. You know, I wanted to be an animator. And the thing is like, I found a calling. You know, people needed a voice because I'm sorry, most developers don't have a voice for themselves. They need to have somebody that they can talk to and be like, I'm really, you know, most of them are like pretty shy, and I'm not. And they're like, yeah, you know, they're pretty low key. Um, the girls are even worse. You know, they're even more quiet. You know, and you have to get through them. You have to talk to them and talk them through their angst. And once you get through that part, you get them now let's have a conversation. Let's have an interview. And then they're like, okay, you know. Uh, I think a lot of it is just knowing how people are. To be a good recruiter, you just have to listen. And when I was younger, I sucked at listening. My wife now, when we first started dating, she's like, you know, you're really good at talking. You're terrible at listening. And yeah.
Oh, did we die? I think we're dead.